After 15 years of trying, Luca finally got pregnant. It would destroy her marriage. The pregnancy test trembled in Luca Walsh's hands, like a fragile butterfly carrying the weight of destiny. 2 pink lines. After 15 years of empty nurseries, failed attempts and whispered prayers, those 2 lines held everything she had ever wanted. Her reflection in the marble bathroom mirror showed a woman transformed, not just by hope, but by the fierce maternal love already coursing through her veins. She pressed the test against her heart, feeling it beat in rhythm with the tiny life growing inside her. This child would be her masterpiece, her legacy, the culmination of everything she and Harry had built together. Their love story had been written in patience, in quiet moments when other couples celebrated their children while they celebrated each other. Now finally, they would celebrate both. Harry Walsh sat in his study, surrounded by the trappings of success, leather-bound books, crystal decanters, and walls lined with awards from his construction empire. At 42, he had built more than buildings. He had built a reputation, a fortune, and what he believed was an unshakable marriage. The sound of Luca's footsteps on the hardwood floors pulled him from his financial reports. "Harry," her voice carried a tremor that made him look up immediately. In 15 years, he had learned to read every nuance of his wife's expressions. Tonight, she glowed with something extraordinary. "What is it, baby?" Luca moved toward him with the grace of a queen approaching her throne. She had always carried herself with dignity, but pregnancy had already begun to transform her into something more powerful, a creator of life, a vessel of miracles. She placed the test on his mahogany desk between them like a peace treaty, ending years of quiet disappointment. Harry stared at the test, his mind struggling to process what his eyes confirmed. 15 years. 15 years of specialists, treatments, hope, and heartbreak. 15 years of Luca crying silently in the shower when she thought he couldn't hear. 15 years of his own quiet grief for children who existed only in their dreams. "Are you sure?" His voice cracked like an adolescent boy discovering love for the first time. 3 tests. All positive. Luca's smile could have powered the city. "We're finally going to be parents, Harry." He should have lifted her, spun her around, called everyone they knew. He should have fallen to his knees in gratitude for this miracle that had chosen their family. Instead, the phone rang, and his mother's voice slithered through the speaker like poison seeking a vein. "Harry, darling, I need to speak with you. It's about Luca." Diane Walsh had perfected the art of destruction disguised as concern. For 15 years, she had watched her son's marriage with the calculated patience of a spider waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She had planted seeds of doubt about Luca's loyalty, her worthiness, her intentions. Most had failed to take root in the fertile ground of their love. But jealousy is patient, and tonight, with the news of pregnancy spreading through their social circle like wildfire, Diane's moment had finally arrived. "I saw her with him again," Diane whispered, her voice carrying the practiced cadence of a woman who had rehearsed this conversation countless times. "At the hotel downtown. They were very intimate." "Mother, that's impossible. Luca would never." "Darling, I know this is hard to hear. But that baby, after 15 years of nothing, and suddenly she's pregnant. You need to ask yourself some difficult questions." The poison spread through Harry's veins like ice water. 15 years of trying, 15 years of failure. And now, suddenly, success. The coincidence felt too perfect, too convenient. His mother's words found the insecurities he had buried deep, the fear that maybe he wasn't enough, that maybe Luca had grown tired of waiting, that maybe love wasn't always enough. "Who?" His voice came out as a rasp. "That contractor, Marcus, the one with the bright smile who's been working on the hotel project. I've seen them together 3 times now, Harry. A woman doesn't look at a man like that unless—" She didn't need to finish. The sentence completed itself in Harry's imagination, feeding on every moment of doubt he had ever experienced. Marcus was young, virile, charming in ways that Harry had forgotten how to be after 15 years of marriage. Marcus was everything Harry feared he no longer was. When Luca returned to the study, she found her husband changed. The joy that had lit his face moments before had been replaced by something cold and terrible. His eyes, which had always held warmth when they looked at her, now held accusation. "Harry, what's wrong?" Who is he?" "Who is who?" "Harry, you're scaring me. Don't lie to me, Luca, not now. Not about this." Harry stood, his 6-foot frame suddenly imposing in a way it had never been with her. "The father." "Who is he?" The words hit Luca like physical blows. She stumbled backward, her hand instinctively moving to protect her belly from the violence of his accusation. "The father is you, Harry. How can you even ask me that?" 15 years, Luca. 15 years of trying, and suddenly you're pregnant. After being seen with another man multiple times. Do you really expect me to believe this miracle is mine? Seen with what man? Harry, what are you talking about? I haven't... Marcus, the contractor. My mother saw you with him. Understanding crashed over Luca like a tsunami of betrayal. Diane, of course. The woman who had smiled at her face while sharpening knives behind her back. The woman who had never forgiven her son for marrying someone who couldn't be controlled, couldn't be intimidated, couldn't be reduced to a mere accessory in the Walsh family drama. Your mother is lying. Harry, I've spoken to Marcus twice, both times about the project timeline, both times with other people present. If she's saying otherwise, are you calling my mother a liar? The question hung between them like a sword. In that moment, Luca realized she was fighting for more than her marriage. She was fighting for her identity, her truth, her right to be believed by the man who had vowed to trust her above all others. "Yes," she said simply. "I am." Harry's face twisted with something Luca had never seen before, disgust. "Get out. Harry, please. Just listen. Get out." His voice shattered the peaceful sanctuary of their home like glass breaking. "I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear your lies. Take your bastard child and get out of my house." The words were designed to break her. They were chosen with surgical precision to destroy everything she was, everything she believed about their love, everything she had built her life upon. But Luca Walsh was not a woman who broke easily. She straightened to her full height, her chin lifting with the defiance of queens who had faced execution with dignity intact. Her voice, when it came, was steady as granite and twice as strong. "This child is yours. Harry Walsh, when you realize what you've thrown away tonight, don't expect me to be waiting for your apology." She walked upstairs with measured steps, packed a single bag with essentials, and left the pregnancy test on his pillow like a final gift he would never deserve to unwrap. When she descended the stairs for the last time, Harry stood in the doorway of his study, watching her leave with eyes that had already begun to show the first shadows of regret. Luca paused at the front door, her hand on the brass handle that would take her from wife to single woman in one turn. She looked back at the man who had been her world for 15 years, memorizing his face before she erased him from her future. "When our son asks about his father, I'll tell him the truth, that you chose your mother's lies over my love. I'll make sure he knows what kind of man abandons his family for gossip and fear." The door closed behind her with the finality of a coffin lid, and Luca Walsh walked into the night carrying the two most precious things in her life, her dignity and her child. Urdrated to divorce papers and steel resolve. Harry expected his wife to come crawling back. He got legal papers instead. Harry Walsh woke to silence so complete it felt accusatory. For 15 years, mornings had begun with the sound of Luca moving through their home, coffee brewing, shower running, the soft rustle of her getting dressed for another day of shared life. Now the mansion echoed with emptiness that felt personal, vindictive. He reached across the bed and found the pregnancy test where she had left it, those two pink lines staring at him like tiny eyes witnessing his destruction. In the harsh light of morning, his mother's words seemed less certain, more poisonous. But pride is a cancer that grows fastest in darkness, and Harry fed his with rationalizations and wounded ego. She would come back. She had nowhere else to go, no money of her own, no real power outside of their marriage. She would realize that fighting him meant fighting the Walsh name, the Walsh fortune, the Walsh connections that made life comfortable. By noon, she would be at the door with tears and apologies, ready to explain everything, ready to beg for forgiveness. By noon, he got something else entirely. James Morrison, senior partner at Morrison, Klein and Associates, knocked on Harry's office door with the gravity of an undertaker. In his hands, he carried documents that would reshape Harry's understanding of his wife and himself. "Harry, I'm afraid I have some papers for you." The divorce petition was 27 pages of legal precision, each clause crafted with surgical accuracy. But it wasn't just the divorce that stunned Harry. It was what Luca wasn't asking for. No alimony, no property division, no claim to the Walsh fortune or the Walsh name. She wanted nothing except her freedom and the right to raise her child without interference. This can't be right. Harry stared at the papers. She's entitled to half of everything. She's waiving those rights, Morrison replied. I've never seen anything like it. Her attorney called this morning to confirm. She wants nothing from you except a clean break. Her attorney? Sarah Chen, one of the best divorce lawyers in the city. Your wife retained her yesterday. Yesterday, while Harry had been expecting apologies and reconciliation, Luca had been building the legal framework for his destruction. While he had been feeding his pride with assumptions about her dependence, she had been demonstrating independence he never knew she possessed. She can't just walk away. There are assets, property, investments. She's walking away from all of it. Harry, everything. She's made it clear she wants nothing that connects her to you or your family. The implications hit him like physical blows. Luca wasn't just leaving him, she was erasing him. She was choosing poverty over his presence, struggle over his support, uncertainty over his love. She was declaring that life without Harry Walsh was worth more than life with him and everything he could provide. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Papers are served. Don't contact me. Don't contact my child. Don't attempt to be part of our lives. You made your choice last night. Now live with it. Luca. Harry stared at the message until the words blurred. My child, not our child. Not even the child. My child. She had already begun the process of erasing his paternity from her vocabulary, his existence from their story. Meanwhile, across the city, Luca sat in Sarah Chen's office signing papers that would sever 15 years of legal, financial, and emotional entanglement. Her hand was steady as she initialed each page, her voice clear as she confirmed her decisions. This wasn't the behavior of a broken woman. This was the behavior of a woman who had found her strength in the ashes of her marriage. Are you sure about the financial provisions? Sarah asked. You're entitled to substantial support, property division, compensation for... I'm sure. Luca's voice carried the finality of a judge's gavel. I want nothing from him. Nothing he can use to control me, manipulate me, or claim ownership over my decisions. I want to be completely free of Harry Walsh. Where will you go? How will you support yourself and the baby? Luca's smile held secrets that would have terrified Harry if he could have seen it. I have plans. Those plans had been forming since the moment Harry had called her child a bastard. While he had been sleeping off his self-righteous anger, she had been making phone calls, liquidating the small investments she had kept in her maiden name, reaching out to contacts from her college business program who had always encouraged her entrepreneurial instincts. Luca had married young and poured herself into being the perfect wife, but she had never been stupid. She had watched Harry build his empire, learning the patterns and principles that separated successful business people from dreamers. She had absorbed knowledge like a sponge, storing it against a day she never thought would come. That day had arrived. Her first call had been to Maria Santos, her college roommate who now ran a successful logistics company in Chicago. I need a job, Maria, and I need to disappear. What happened? My husband chose his mother over his wife and child. I'm about to show him what that choice really costs. Her second call had been to David Kim, a venture capitalist who had once told her she had the best business instincts of anyone in Harry's social circle. David, I want to start a company. I have some capital and a lot of motivation. What kind of company? The kind that makes men like Harry Walsh irrelevant. By the time Harry received the divorce papers, Luca had already begun building the infrastructure of her new life. She had found a modest apartment in a different part of the city, far from the Walsh mansion and the Walsh influence. She had opened new bank accounts, established new credit, begun the paperwork for a new business venture focused on construction logistics, an industry she understood better than anyone thanks to 15 years of listening to Harry's work stories. The irony wasn't lost on her. Harry had unknowingly trained his own competition. That evening, Harry sat in his empty mansion, surrounded by the silence that had replaced his wife's presence. He tried calling her phone, disconnected. He tried reaching her through mutual friends. They claimed not to know where she had gone. He tried contacting her sister. The woman hung up on him after calling him several names that would have made a sailor blush. For the first time in his adult life, Harry Walsh was completely powerless. His money meant nothing. His connections were useless. His name carried no weight. Luca had simply vanished, taking their child and his future with her. He poured himself a whiskey and stared at the divorce papers, reading them like a man trying to decode his own death sentence. 27 pages that dismantled 15 years of marriage with the efficiency of a demolition crew. No anger, no vindictiveness, no emotional pleas, just legal precision that felt more insulting than any screamed accusation could have been. His mother called, her voice honey-sweet with false concern. "Darling, I heard about the papers. I'm so sorry, but you know this is for the best. She would have trapped you with that child. Bled you dry." Harry hung up on her for the first time in his life, alone in his mansion, surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt meaningless. Harry Walsh began to understand what he had lost. Not just a wife, he had lost his partner, his best friend, his moral compass, his future. He had traded love for lies, truth for pride. Forever for a moment of wounded ego. He looked at the pregnancy test still sitting on his desk. Those 2 pink lines now feeling like an accusation, a reminder, a promise of the life he had thrown away. Somewhere in the city, Luca was carrying his child and building a future that would never again include him. "She'll be back," he whispered to the empty room. But the words sounded hollow, even to him. "She has to come back." The silence that answered him suggested otherwise, and in that silence, Harry Walsh began to learn the difference between being alone and being abandoned. Luca had chosen to be alone. Harry had chosen to be abandoned. The distinction would haunt him for years to come, and tomorrow would prove that his nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 3. Building an Empire from Ashes. While Harry waited for Luca to fail, she was busy becoming unstoppable. The apartment was a third the size of the Walsh mansion, with windows that overlooked a busy street instead of manicured gardens. But to Luca, it felt like a palace because it was hers. Every stick of furniture, every plate in the small kitchen, every thread of fabric in the modest nursery she was preparing belonged to her and her alone. No one could take it away. No one could use it against her. No one could make her feel grateful for what she had earned. Pregnancy had given her a glow that seemed to emanate from within. Strangers smiled at her on the street, sensing something powerful and new in her bearing. She carried her growing belly like a crown, a visible symbol of the life she was creating, both the child inside her and the future she was building. The morning sickness had been replaced by an energy that felt almost supernatural. While Harry spent his days waiting for phone calls that would never come, Luca spent hers laying the foundation for an empire that would make his construction business look like a child's toy set. Her business plan was elegant in its simplicity: construction, logistics, and supply chain management. She had listened to Harry complain for 15 years about delayed deliveries, unreliable suppliers, miscommunications between contractors and vendors. She had absorbed every detail of his frustrations, every gap in the market, every opportunity he was too established to pursue. Now, she would fill those gaps. Luca's first client came through Maria Santos, who connected her with a mid-sized construction company struggling with project delays. "I can solve your supply chain problems," Luca told them, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Within 2 weeks, she had streamlined their processes, negotiated better deals with suppliers, and reduced their project completion time by 20%. Word spread through the industry like wildfire. The mysterious woman who had appeared from nowhere with solutions to problems no one else could solve. She worked 18-hour days, her laptop open at the kitchen table, her phone constantly ringing with new opportunities. The baby seemed to thrive on her ambition, kicking stronger whenever she closed another deal, as if celebrating their shared victories. By her 7th month, Luca's apartment had been transformed into a command center. Charts covered the walls, tracking suppliers' timelines and profit margins. Her small team of employees, carefully chosen for their skills and loyalty rather than their connections, worked remotely, coordinated by a woman who seemed to see 3 moves ahead of everyone else in the game. Harry's friends began mentioning her name in conversations, not knowing who she really was. "There's this new logistics company," they would say, "run by some woman named Luca. She's revolutionizing supply chain management." They would speak of her with the grudging respect that established businessmen reserved for disruptive competitors who couldn't be ignored. Harry heard these conversations with growing unease. The name was too familiar, the timing too convenient. But surely his wife, his ex-wife, couldn't be the same person. Surely the woman who had depended on him for everything couldn't be building something that was beginning to threaten his industry dominance. He hired a private investigator to confirm his suspicions, and the report that came back felt like reading his own obituary. Luca Walsh, now Luca Martinez, using her maiden name, was indeed the logistics genius his competitors were talking about. More than that, she was systematically targeting the gaps in his business model, the weaknesses he had ignored, the opportunities he had dismissed as too small to matter. She wasn't just succeeding, she was succeeding by being everything he wasn't. Where he was rigid, she was adaptable. Where he relied on established relationships, she built new ones based on performance. Where he commanded through hierarchy, she led through competence. The investigator's photos showed a woman transformed. Gone was the society wife who had adorned his arm at charity events. In her place was a businesswoman who walked like she owned the sidewalk, who spoke to clients with the authority of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve, who carried her pregnancy like armor rather than vulnerability. Harry stared at the photos until his eyes burned. This wasn't the broken woman he had expected to come crawling back. This was a stranger who wore his ex-wife's face and carried his child while building an empire that made his own success look accidental. The birth came in March, during a blizzard that shut down the city. Luca went into labor while reviewing a proposal that would double her company's revenue, her laptop still open when the contractions became too strong to ignore. She drove herself to the hospital, called her sister to meet her there, and brought Ollie Walsh into the world with the same determination she brought to everything else. The first thing she whispered to her son was a promise. "You will never need anyone the way I needed your father. You will never be disappointed the way I was disappointed. You will be strong because I am strong, and loved because I love you completely." Harry found out about the birth 3 days later, through a brief legal notice informing him that Oliver Walsh had been born, was healthy, and that his parental rights had been formally severed at the mother's request. He would have no claim to the child, no visitation rights, and no role in Ollie's life beyond the biological contribution he had already dismissed as irrelevant. The notice included a photo, the only one he would see of his son for years. Ollie was small and perfect, with Luca's determined chin and what looked like Harry's dark hair. But his eyes were all his own, bright and alert, as if he had been born knowing exactly who he was and what he was destined to become. Harry called every lawyer in the city, desperate to assert his paternal rights. But Luca had been thorough in her legal preparation. His public rejection of the child's paternity, his accusations of infidelity, his demand that she leave with her bastard child, all of it had been documented and filed. No court would grant rights to a father who had so completely rejected fatherhood. Meanwhile, Luca recovered from childbirth with the same efficiency she brought to business. Within 2 weeks, she was back to work. Ollie sleeping in a bassinet next to her desk while she revolutionized construction logistics one project at a time. She hired a nanny, not because she couldn't handle motherhood and entrepreneurship, but because she refused to give any competitor the advantage of her divided attention. Ollie grew up in offices and conference rooms, absorbing the rhythms of business like other children absorbed lullabies. His first words were mama and deal, which never failed to make Luca laugh. He was a happy child, surrounded by a team of adults who treated him like a small prince, who celebrated his milestones as victories for the entire company. By Ollie's first birthday, Luca's company had grown from a one-woman operation to a mid-sized firm with 25 employees and clients across 3 states. By his second birthday, she had opened offices in 2 additional cities and was being courted by major construction companies who wanted to partner with the woman who had solved problems they didn't even know they had. Harry watched this success from a distance, his own business steady, but no longer growing at the pace it once had. His focus had been shattered by loss, his confidence undermined by the knowledge that the woman he had dismissed was outperforming him in his own industry. His friends still spoke of the logistics genius named Luca, not knowing they were praising the woman who had once been Harry's wife. On Ollie's 3rd birthday, Harry hired another investigator to take updated photos. The child was beautiful, clearly intelligent, with a smile that felt like looking at his own baby pictures. Luca looked radiant, successful, completely content with the life she had built. They were photographed at Ollie's birthday party, surrounded by friends and employees who had become family, celebrating a child who would never know his father's name. Harry kept that photo on his desk, hidden beneath other papers, but always within reach. It was a reminder of what he had lost, what he had thrown away, what he had been too proud and too stupid to recognize as precious when it was his. His mother visited less frequently now, sensing perhaps that her poison had worked too well. She had wanted to destroy Luca's marriage to her son, but she had also destroyed her son in the process. Harry was wealthy but empty, successful but haunted, powerful but alone. "You did the right thing," she would say when she visited, but the words sounded hollow even to her. Harry would nod and pour another drink, staring out the windows of his empty mansion toward a life he could no longer reach. By Ollie's 4th birthday, the boy had begun asking questions about fathers, about families that looked different from his own. Luca answered him honestly but without bitterness. Some children have daddies, some have mommies, some have both, some have neither. What matters isn't the shape of your family, but the love inside it. And you, my darling boy, are loved completely. Ollie seemed satisfied with this explanation, as children often are when given truth instead of lies. He grew up secure in his mother's love, confident in his place in the world, unburdened by the absence of a father who had never wanted him anyway. What Ollie didn't know, what no one knew except Harry, was that his father watched from the shadows, collecting photos and newspaper articles about his son's achievements, like artifacts of a life he would never share. Harry had become a ghost haunting his own story, observing the family he had destroyed from a distance that felt like forever, and in his empty mansion, surrounded by wealth that couldn't buy back what he had lost, Harry Walsh began to understand that some mistakes are too large for apologies to cover, too deep for time to heal, too complete for redemption to reach. But understanding and accepting are different things, and Harry was nowhere near ready to accept that his story with Luca and Ollie was truly over. The reckoning he couldn't imagine was still years away, gathering strength like a storm on the horizon. Chapter 4. When Loyalty Dies. Success built on lies always crumbles eventually. Harry Walsh had built his empire on handshakes and promises, on the old boy network that valued connections over competence, loyalty over innovation. For 20 years it had worked beautifully. His construction company had grown from a small operation to a regional powerhouse, sustained by relationships with suppliers who had done business with his father, contractors who valued stability over savings, and investors who trusted the Walsh name more than they trusted market analysis. But empires built on foundations of sand have a way of revealing their weakness when the tide changes. The first crack appeared when Peterson Holdings, his largest client, chose a different contractor for their flagship hotel project. James Peterson had been Harry's friend since college, had been best man at his wedding to Luca, had assured Harry that their business relationship was as solid as family bonds. "I'm sorry, Harry," Peterson said over lunch at their usual restaurant, "but this new logistics company is offering something we can't ignore. 20% faster completion times, 15% cost savings, and their track record is flawless. I'd be failing my investors if I didn't go with the better option." Harry felt ice forming in his stomach. "What logistics company?" "Some firm called Martinez Solutions, run by this woman named Luca Martinez. She's apparently revolutionizing how construction projects are managed. Haven't you heard of her?" The name hit Harry like a physical blow. Martinez, Luca's maiden name. The woman Peterson was praising, the competitor who was stealing Harry's biggest client, was his ex-wife. The woman he had kicked out for being unfaithful was now outcompeting him in his own industry using skills she had learned from watching him work. "I've heard the name," Harry managed. "You should look into partnering with her. This Martinez woman is making everyone else look obsolete. My project manager says she's 3 steps ahead of every problem, like she can see around corners. If you could get her working with you instead of against you." But Harry knew there was no partnership possible with Luca. He had burned that bridge so thoroughly that not even ashes remained. She wasn't just competing with him. She was systematically dismantling everything he had built, using his own methods against him with improvements he had been too arrogant to consider. The second crack came from his supply chain. Rodriguez Materials, who had provided concrete for Harry's projects for 15 years, called to renegotiate their contract terms. Miguel Rodriguez, who had been a family friend, sounded uncomfortable but determined. "Harry, I need to be honest with you. We're getting pressure from this Martinez Solutions company. They're offering our other clients better terms, faster turnaround, more efficient scheduling. If we want to stay competitive, we need to adjust how we do business with everyone. You're breaking our contract. I'm asking you to modernize it. The old way of doing business isn't working anymore. There's someone out there who's figured out how to do everything better, faster, cheaper. If we don't adapt, we all go under." Harry found himself nodding along to business advice that sounded eerily familiar. These were conversations he had had with Luca years ago, suggestions she had made that he had dismissed as impractical idealism. She had told him the industry was changing, that relationships without performance were becoming liabilities, that innovation was more valuable than tradition. He had laughed at her then. The laughter tasted bitter now. The third crack was the most personal. His investment group, 5 men who had been his friends and business partners for over a decade, called an emergency meeting. They gathered in the conference room of Walsh Construction like pallbearers preparing for a funeral. "Harry, we need to talk about the direction of the company," said Robert Chen, the group's financial analyst. "Our profit margins are shrinking, our client retention is down 30%, and our project completion times are starting to look embarrassing compared to industry standards." "We're still profitable," Harry protested. "Barely, and trending downward fast. Meanwhile, there's a company called Martinez Solutions that's making us all look like amateurs. They're winning contracts we used to get automatically, solving problems we didn't even know we had, setting new standards for efficiency that make our old methods look prehistoric." Thomas Wright, who had been Harry's roommate in college, leaned forward with the expression of someone delivering bad news to a friend. "Harry, we think you need to step back from day-to-day operations. Let us bring in new management, modernize our processes, maybe even try to poach some talent from this Martinez company." "You want me out of my own company?" "We want you to let us save it before it's too late." Harry looked around the table at faces that had once looked at him with respect, admiration, even envy. Now they looked at him with pity, the way people look at someone who has fallen from grace and doesn't yet realize they're lying in the gutter. That night, Harry sat in his home office, surrounded by awards and photos from better times. There was his picture with the mayor at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. There was his handshake with the governor when Walsh Construction had won the contract for the new courthouse. There was his wedding photo with Luca, both of them young and confident and convinced they would conquer the world together. He pulled out his laptop and did what he should have done years ago. He researched Martinez Solutions thoroughly, professionally, without the filter of pride or denial that had blinded him to what Luca had become. The company website was sleek and modern, featuring testimonials from satisfied clients, case studies of improved efficiency, and photos of projects completed on time and under budget. The About Us section featured a professional photo of Luca, though she called herself Luca Martinez now, looking confident and competent in a way that made Harry's chest ache with recognition and loss. She looked like the woman he had married, but refined by success, polished by independence, elevated by the knowledge that she had built something meaningful with her own hands and mind. Her biography mentioned her extensive background in construction management and logistics optimization, but made no reference to her marriage or her previous life as Mrs. Harry Walsh. The client testimonials read like love letters to her competence. "Luca Martinez saved our project and our reputation. Martinez Solutions delivered results we didn't think were possible. Working with Luca's team was the best business decision we've ever made." Harry clicked through project galleries, seeing construction sites managed with precision that made his own work look chaotic. He read case studies detailing improvements that would have saved his company hundreds of thousands of dollars if he had been smart enough to implement them. He watched video testimonials from clients who spoke of Luca with the kind of respect Harry had once taken for granted. This wasn't luck. This wasn't beginner's fortune. This was competence refined into excellence, intelligence applied with surgical precision, business acumen developed through years of watching him make every mistake she now knew how to avoid. She had been learning from him all along, absorbing his methods while developing better ones, preparing for a future neither of them had imagined. When he had thrown her out, she hadn't just landed on her feet, she had started running and hadn't stopped. The phone rang. Another client cancelling, another supplier renegotiating, another friend explaining why they had to choose Martinez Solutions over Walsh Construction. Each call felt like another nail in a coffin Harry was building for himself with his own pride and stupidity. By dawn, Harry understood what was happening. This wasn't just business competition, this was systematic dismantling. Luca wasn't just succeeding in construction logistics. She was making Harry Walsh irrelevant in his own industry. Every client she won, every process she improved, every problem she solved was proof that the emperor had no clothes. that Harry's success had been built more on relationships and reputation than on actual competence. She was better at his job than he was. She had always been better. He had been too arrogant to see it, too threatened to acknowledge it, too stupid to value it. His mother called, her voice full of false sympathy. "Darling, I heard about Peterson pulling out. These things happen in business. You'll bounce back. Will I?" Harry's voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Of course you will. You're a Walsh. We always land on our feet." But Harry was beginning to understand that being a Walsh might not mean what it used to. Names and reputations were only valuable if they represented actual value. Luca had no famous family, no inherited advantages, no old boy network to rely on, and she was destroying him anyway, using nothing but intelligence, innovation, and the kind of work ethic that had once made him feel like the luckiest man alive to have her as a partner. He hung up on his mother and walked to the window, looking out at the city where somewhere his ex-wife was building an empire while his own kingdom crumbled. Tomorrow he would have to decide whether to fight a battle he was already losing, or find a way to salvage what remained of his dignity and his business. But tonight, for the first time since Luca had left, Harry Walsh allowed himself to acknowledge the truth that would change everything. He had thrown away the most valuable thing he had ever owned, and she was using what she had learned from him to prove it every single day. The sound of his own destruction was the success of the woman he had been too foolish to deserve. Chapter 5. The Untouchable. Queen, when Harry found Luca, she wasn't the broken woman he remembered. The glass towers of downtown reflected the morning sun like a crown of diamonds, and at the center of it all stood the Martinez Solutions building, 30 floors of steel and ambition that had risen from nothing in just 5 years. Harry sat in his car across the street, staring up at the monument to his ex-wife's success, gathering courage for a conversation he should have had years ago. He had hired 3 different private investigators over the past year, each one confirming what he already knew but couldn't accept. Luca had become everything he had once been, and more. Her company occupied floors 25 through 30 of the building, with a staff of over 200 employees and contracts spanning the entire eastern seaboard. The investigators' most recent report had included photos that felt like looking at a stranger. Luca arriving at work in a sleek black car, wearing designer suits that spoke of success earned rather than inherited. Luca in board meetings, commanding rooms full of executives with the easy confidence of someone who had never met a problem she couldn't solve. Luca at industry awards ceremonies, accepting recognition for innovations that were revolutionizing construction logistics. She had become a queen in an industry ruled by kings, and she had done it without asking anyone's permission. Harry checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, straightening his tie and trying to summon the confidence that had once come naturally. 5 years ago, he had been the established player, the one with connections and reputation. Now he felt like a petitioner approaching a throne, hoping for audience with royalty who had outgrown the need for his approval. The Martinez Solutions lobby was a testament to understated elegance. Polished marble floors, contemporary art on the walls, and a reception area that hummed with quiet efficiency. The receptionist, a young woman with bright eyes and professional demeanor, looked up as Harry approached. "Good morning. How can I help you? I'd like to see Luca Martinez." "I'm Harry Walsh." The woman's expression didn't change, but Harry caught the subtle shift in her posture, the way her fingers moved toward her phone. She had been trained for this moment, prepared for the possibility that Luca's past might someday walk through their doors. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Walsh?" "No, but I think she'll want to see me." "I'm afraid Ms. Martinez only takes meetings by appointment. Her schedule is quite full. Perhaps I could have someone from our business development team." "Tell her it's about Ollie." The words hung in the air like a threat and a promise. The receptionist's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing uncertainty. She picked up her phone and spoke in low, urgent tones. Harry couldn't hear the conversation, but he could see its effect. A straightening of shoulders, a quick glance in his direction, a series of rapid nods. "Miss Martinez will see you," she said after hanging up, "but she can only spare 15 minutes. Please take the executive elevator to the 30th floor." The elevator ride felt eternal. Each floor marking another level of success that separated the woman he was about to see from the woman he had once been married to. When the doors opened, Harry found himself in an executive suite that spoke of power wielded with precision rather than displayed for show. Luca's office occupied the building's northeast corner, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of the city that made Harry feel small by comparison. She sat behind a massive desk made of some dark wood he couldn't identify, her attention focused on a tablet, displaying what looked like project timelines and budget analyses. She didn't look up immediately, and Harry realized this was intentional, a power play that demonstrated how completely their roles had reversed. Once she'd waited for his attention, hoped for his approval, structured her day around his schedule. Now he stood in her office, waiting for her acknowledgement like a supplicant seeking favor from a distant god. When she finally looked up, Harry felt his breath catch. 5 years had refined her beauty into something more dangerous than mere attractiveness. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a way that framed her face with professional elegance. Her skin had the glow that came from purpose fulfilled and challenges conquered. But it was her eyes that stopped his heart. They held no anger, no hurt, no residual emotion from their shared past. They held nothing at all where he was concerned, and that was more devastating than hatred could ever have been. "Harry," her voice was professionally neutral, the tone she might use with any stranger conducting business. "You mentioned Ollie. Is something wrong?" "No, nothing's wrong. He struggled to find words that wouldn't sound pathetic. "I wanted to see you." "To talk? About what?" The question was delivered without malice, but its simplicity cut through every practice speech he had prepared. About what indeed? About their marriage? About the child he had rejected? About the success she had built from the ashes of their relationship? About the fact that she had become everything he had never imagined she could be? "About us," he said finally. Luca leaned back in her chair, and for the first time something like amusement flickered in her eyes. Not the warm laughter he remembered from their marriage, but the cool satisfaction of someone watching a chess opponent realize they had already lost the game. "There is no us. Harry, there hasn't been for 5 years. But Ollie is my son. You made that very clear when you threw us out. You called him a bastard, remember? You said you didn't want to see either of us again. I took you at your word." The words were delivered without heat, but they landed like physical blows. Harry found himself gripping the back of the chair in front of her desk, needing something solid to anchor him as the ground shifted beneath his feet. "I made a mistake. I was wrong about everything. I let Your mother didn't make your choices, Harry. You did. You chose to believe lies over love, suspicion over trust, pride over family. Those were your decisions. I want to make it right. There's nothing to make right. I've made a good life for myself and my son. We don't need anything from you." The casual way she said "my son" felt like a door slamming shut. Not our son, not your son too, but my son. As if Harry's biological contribution was irrelevant, as if Ollie belonged entirely to her in every way that mattered. He's my son too. Biologically, perhaps, but in every way that matters, love, support, guidance, presence, he's mine alone. You forfeited any claim to fatherhood when you rejected him before he was even born. Harry looked around the office, taking in the awards on the walls, the photos of successful projects, the evidence of a life built without him. There were no pictures of Ollie visible, which somehow felt worse than if there had been. It meant she kept their son completely separate from her professional life, protected from any connection to the Walsh name or the Walsh legacy. "I've been following your company," he said. "You've done incredible things. Thank you. I mean it. You've revolutionized the industry. You're better at this than I ever was." "I know." The simple confidence of her response hit him harder than any boast could have. She wasn't gloating or trying to hurt him. She was just stating a fact that both of them knew to be true. She was better at his job than he had ever been, and she had proven it by systematically outcompeting him in his own market. "I could have helped you," he said. "If I hadn't been so stupid, so proud, could have, would have, should have. None of that matters now, Harry. I didn't need your help then, and I don't need it now. I built this myself, from nothing while raising a child alone. Everything you see here exists because I made it exist, not because someone gave me permission or opportunity." She stood up, moving to the window with a grace that spoke of confidence earned through trial by fire. Harry watched her silhouette against the city skyline and realized he was looking at someone who had transformed herself from wife to warrior, from dependent to independent, from the woman he had underestimated to the woman who was making him irrelevant. "What do you want, Harry? Really?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. What did he want? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? A second chance at a life he had thrown away? The right to know his son? The opportunity to be part of the empire she had built? "I want my family back," he said quietly. Luca turned from the window, and for a moment, something flickered across her face. Not hope, not anger, but something that might have been pity. "Your family," she said softly. "Harry, you threw your family away 5 years ago. What you want now is my family. My son, my life, my success. But none of that belongs to you anymore. I could change. I could be different. I'm sure you could. But I don't need you to change, and I don't need you to be different. I need you to understand that I've moved beyond needing you at all." The finality in her voice was like a judge's gavel falling, pronouncing sentence on hopes he had been nursing for years. Harry felt something break inside him. Not his heart, which had been broken long ago, but his pride, his certainty that wealth and charm and determination could fix anything. "Can I at least see him? Meet him?" "Why?" "Because he's my son. He's a child who has never needed a father because he's had a mother who was enough. He's happy, Harry. He's loved, secure, confident. He has a good life. Why would I disrupt that for your benefit?" Harry had no answer that didn't sound selfish, no argument that put Ollie's needs above his own wants. He was asking to insert himself into a life that was complete without him, to claim a role he had abdicated, to matter to someone who had learned to thrive in his absence. "Your 15 minutes are up," Luca said, returning to her desk. "And I have a conference call with clients in Seattle. If you'll excuse me." Harry stood there for a moment longer, looking at the woman who had once been his wife and was now something far more dangerous, his superior in every way that mattered. She had already dismissed him from her attention, her focus returning to the work that had made her more successful than he had ever been. Walking back to the elevator, Harry understood that he hadn't just lost his family. He had lost his relevance in their story. Luca hadn't just survived his abandonment. She had used it as fuel to become everything he had never imagined she could be. She was untouchable, not because she was hiding, but because she was flying at altitudes he couldn't reach. As the elevator descended, Harry realized he wasn't just going down 30 floors. He was returning to a world where Luca Martinez was the standard of excellence. And he was just another man who had underestimated the wrong woman. The Queen had granted him an audience, and he had been found wanting. Chapter 6. The Son's Verdict. Ollie had never met his father, but he'd already decided Harry Walsh was worthless. The coffee shop near Ollie's school buzzed with afternoon energy, students hunched over laptops, parents grabbing caffeine before pickup, business meetings conducted in hushed tones over lattes and croissants. Harry sat at a corner table, hands trembling slightly as he watched the entrance, waiting for his first glimpse of the son who carried his DNA but had never spoken his name. 3 weeks had passed since his meeting with Luca. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, unanswered phone calls, and legal consultations that all ended the same way. He had no rights, no claims, no legal standing to demand access to a child he had publicly rejected. But Harry had learned Ollie's schedule through observation and desperation. School dismissal at 3:15. Soccer practice on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Piano lessons on Wednesdays. Today was Wednesday, and Harry's heart hammered against his ribs as teenage boys began filtering into the coffee shop. Backpacks slung over shoulders, voices carrying the easy confidence of youth. He recognized his son immediately, not from resemblance, but from recognition. The way Ollie moved through space with purpose, the way other kids seemed to orbit around him, the way he carried himself like someone who had never doubted his place in the world. Ollie Walsh was 15 and magnificent, tall for his age, with the kind of natural athleticism that made movement look effortless. His skin was a beautiful blend of his parents' heritage, his hair dark and thick like Harry's had been at that age, but his eyes, those were Luca's eyes, sharp and observant and missing nothing. Harry watched his son order at the counter with polite confidence, chatting with the barista like they were old friends. Other students gravitated toward Ollie naturally, not with the desperate social climbing of high school hierarchies, but with the genuine affection reserved for people who made others feel valued and heard. Ollie Walsh? Harry approached the group tentatively, his voice cracking slightly on his son's name. The teenager turned, and Harry found himself looking into eyes that assessed him with intelligence far beyond their years. There was no recognition, no spark of connection, just the polite curiosity Ollie would show any adult who approached him in public. "Yes, sir? Do I know you?" Harry's prepared speech evaporated under the weight of those measuring eyes. "I'm Harry Walsh, your father." The effect was immediate and devastating. Ollie's expression didn't change dramatically. He was too well raised for that. But something cold and final settled behind his eyes. His friends, sensing the sudden tension, stepped closer protectively. "You're not my father," Ollie said quietly. "You donated DNA 15 years ago. That's not the same thing." The words were delivered without heat, without anger, but with the kind of quiet finality that hits harder than screaming ever could. Harry felt his chest constrict, as if his son had reached inside him and squeezed his heart in a teenage fist. "Ollie, I know I made mistakes." "Mistakes?" The teenager's voice remained conversational, but his friends exchanged glances that suggested they knew this story, had probably heard it many times. "You called my mother a whore. You called me a bastard. You threw us out when she was pregnant. Those weren't mistakes. Those were choices." Other customers were beginning to notice the conversation, smartphones discreetly angled to capture what was clearly becoming a confrontation. Harry realized he had walked into an ambush of his own making, orchestrated by a 15-year-old who had inherited his mother's strategic thinking and sharpened it into a weapon. "I was wrong about everything. I let your grandmother poison my mind with lies." "Don't!" The single word carried so much authority that Harry actually stepped backward. "Don't blame your mother for your decisions. Don't make excuses. And don't stand there and pretend this is about me, when it's obviously about you feeling guilty. I want to get to know you. I want to be part of your life." Ollie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My life? You mean the life my mother built while working 18-hour days to support us both? You mean the life where she never missed a soccer game, never forgot a piano recital, never let me feel like I was missing anything by not having a father? That life. You are missing something. You're missing a father who loves you." "No," Ollie said, and his certainty was absolute. "I'm not missing anything. My mother loves me. My aunts love me. My mother's friends love me. I have teachers who care about me, coaches who believe in me, and a whole company full of people who've watched me grow up. I don't need love from someone who didn't want me." The casual way Ollie dismantled Harry's assumptions felt like watching a masterclass in emotional warfare. This wasn't a confused teenager acting out. This was a young man who had been raised by a woman who never spoke ill of Harry, but had taught their son to value actions over words, presence over promises, loyalty over biology. "I do want you now," Harry said desperately. "Now that you need something from me, you mean? Now that you've realized my mother is more successful than you ever were? Now that you're facing the consequences of your choices?" Harry stared at his son, seeing not just Luca's intelligence, but her ability to cut straight to the truth of any situation. Ollie wasn't wrong. Harry's desire to reconnect had coincided perfectly with his business failures, his growing isolation, his dawning understanding of what he had lost. "Your friends can record this if they want," Ollie continued, noticing the phones trained on them. "I don't mind people knowing the truth. My mother built an empire while raising me alone. She never said a bad word about you, but she never made excuses for you either. She just made sure I knew that good men don't abandon their families, and real fathers don't need to be begged to love their children. I could be a good father now." To who? Ollie's question was genuinely curious, as if he were asking Harry to solve a math problem. "You couldn't be a good father to the baby I was. You couldn't be a good father to the toddler I was. You couldn't be a good father to the child I was. What makes you think you can be a good father to the teenager I am now? Because you've learned that my mother is more successful than you. You've learned that I exist and I'm doing well. You've learned that you made a mistake. But have you learned how to love someone even when they disappoint you? Have you learned how to trust someone even when other people plant doubts? Have you learned how to choose your family over your pride?" The questions hung in the air like an exam Harry knew he would fail. Every word out of his son's mouth revealed the depth of his own failure, not just as a husband, but as a man. Ollie wasn't cruel or vindictive. He was simply holding Harry accountable for choices that had shaped a child's entire worldview. "I want the chance to prove I can learn those things. Why? Should I care what you want?" Ollie asked, and for the first time, Harry heard emotion in his son's voice. Not anger, but something deeper and more damaging. "For 15 years, what I wanted didn't matter to you. My mother's happiness didn't matter to you. Our family didn't matter to you. Why should your wants matter to me now?" Harry looked around the coffee shop, realizing that this conversation was being witnessed by dozens of people who would undoubtedly share the story. Tomorrow, everyone would know that Harry Walsh had been systematically destroyed by a 15-year-old who spoke with the moral authority of someone who had never compromised his principles. "What do you want from me?" Harry asked finally. "Nothing," Ollie replied immediately. "I want nothing from you. I don't want your money, your apologies, your guilt, or your sudden interest in being a father. I want you to leave my mother alone. I want you to leave me alone. I want you to go back to whatever life you built after you destroyed ours. And if I can't do that?" For the first time, Ollie smiled, and Harry saw Luca's steel wrapped in a 15-year-old's determination. "Then you'll discover that I learn more from my mother than just good manners and moral clarity. I learned how to protect the people I love from people who would hurt them. The threat wasn't explicit, but it was unmistakable. Ollie Walsh might be 15, but he was also Luca Martinez's son, raised in boardrooms and strategy sessions, surrounded by adults who had taught him that power used wisely was more effective than power used loudly. Harry looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw a young man who would never need his approval, never want his guidance, never forgive his absence. Ollie had been shaped by abandonment into someone who couldn't be abandoned again, raised by a single mother into someone who would never repeat his father's mistakes. "I'm proud of you," Harry said quietly. "Save it for someone who cares," Ollie replied, but not unkindly. "Mom's picking me up in 10 minutes. You should be gone by then." Harry nodded, understanding that he had been dismissed by someone who had inherited Luca's ability to end conversations when they had served their purpose. He walked toward the door, feeling the weight of dozens of stares, knowing that this story would spread through the city's social circles like wildfire. At the door, he turned back to look at his son one more time. Ollie was already back to normal conversation with his friends, laughing at something on someone's phone, completely unaffected by the encounter. Harry realized that meeting him had been just another Wednesday afternoon interruption for Ollie. Forgettable, irrelevant, no more meaningful than a wrong number or a stranger asking for directions. Outside, Harry sat in his car and watched through the coffee shop window as Luca's sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb. Ollie emerged from the shop with easy confidence, sliding into the passenger seat with the comfortable familiarity of a child who had never doubted his welcome anywhere his mother was. Through the car's tinted windows, Harry caught a glimpse of Luca, listening to whatever story Ollie was telling about his day. Her attention completely focused on her son. Neither of them looked toward the coffee shop or acknowledged Harry's presence in any way. He had become invisible in their story, a footnote in their success, a cautionary tale they might reference but never revisit. As they drove away, Harry understood that he hadn't just met his son. He had been judged by him and found wanting. And the verdict, delivered with 15-year-old clarity and Luca's uncompromising moral standards, was final. Harry Walsh was not a father because fathers don't abandon their children, and some mistakes are too fundamental to forgive. The reckoning he had feared was beginning, and his own son was the judge who would show him no mercy. Chapter 7. Shadows and Secrets. Harry began his penance the only way a coward knew how, in secret. The investigator's monthly report landed on Harry's desk like a medical diagnosis. Clinical, detailed and devastating in its thoroughness. 23 pages documenting every aspect of his son's life that he was missing. Every moment of Luca's success that highlighted his own failures. Every choice they made that demonstrated how completely they had moved beyond needing him. Ollie was struggling with calculus. His piano teacher thought he had concert-level potential, but lacked the discipline for serious classical training. His soccer coach was talking about scholarship opportunities. He had been dating a girl named Emma for 3 months, and she came to family dinners at Luca's house every Sunday. Harry read these details like a starving man consuming breadcrumbs, each piece of information simultaneously nourishing and torturing him. His son was 15 and living a full, rich life that had no space for Harry in it. But there were gaps, small ones, places where resources or opportunities might make a difference. The calculus tutor cost $200 per session. The soccer camp that could elevate Ollie's game cost $3,000. The piano lessons with the renowned instructor who could develop his potential cost $500 per hour. Small expenses for someone with Harry's resources. Impossible luxuries for a single mother building a business from scratch. No matter how successful she had become, Harry began with the anonymous scholarships. The prestigious soccer camp suddenly received a donation from an unnamed benefactor, earmarked for students who showed exceptional promise but needed financial assistance. Ollie's name appeared on the recipient list as if by magic. His acceptance letter arriving with a full scholarship that covered not just tuition, but equipment, transportation, and meals. Luca spent 3 days trying to track down the mysterious donor, her investigative instincts triggered by generosity that felt too convenient to be coincidental. But the paperwork led through a maze of shell companies and legal entities that obscured the source effectively. Eventually, she accepted it as one of those rare moments when the universe conspired to help rather than hinder. "Someone's watching out for you, baby," she told Ollie as they celebrated his acceptance. "Make sure you deserve their faith in you." Harry watched from across town, reading the investigators' report about their celebration dinner, drinking wine that tasted like victory and regret in equal measure. He had given his son something meaningful, Opportunity, advancement, a chance to develop his talents. And he had done it without demanding credit, without expecting gratitude, without forcing his presence into their lives. It felt like the first right thing he had done as a father. The academic support came next. Harry had connections at the city's most exclusive tutoring center, relationships built over years of charity donations and social networking. A few phone calls, a discreet contribution to their scholarship fund, and suddenly Ollie was accepted into their advanced mathematics program with a full merit scholarship that no one could trace back to Harry. Within 2 months, Ollie's calculus grades improved from C- to A-. His confidence in mathematics blossomed into genuine interest, opening doors to advanced placement courses and engineering programs he had never considered before. Luca watched her son's academic transformation with the fierce pride of a mother who had always believed in his potential, but had worried about affording the support to develop it. "You're brilliant," she told him as they reviewed his improved report card. "You always were. Sometimes it just takes the right help to let that brilliance shine through." Harry read about this conversation in his investigator's report and felt something crack open in his chest. Not heartbreak, but its opposite. He was helping raise his son, even from the shadows. He was contributing to Ollie's development, supporting his growth, investing in his future. It wasn't fatherhood as he had imagined it, but it was something real and meaningful and good. The musical opportunities were more complex to arrange. The city's most prestigious piano instructor had a waiting list 3 years long and charged fees that put her services out of reach for most families. But she also had a history of taking on exceptionally talented students pro bono when their potential justified the investment. Harry arranged for Ollie to audition through a third party, his performance recorded and submitted anonymously to the instructor as part of a talent search program that existed only in Harry's imagination and the instructor's mailbox. When she heard Ollie play, her response was immediate and definitive. This boy was worth her time, her expertise, her personal attention. "Mrs. Chen wants to teach me," Ollie announced to his mother, barely containing his excitement. "She says I have natural musicality that could be developed into something special, and she's willing to do it for free, because she believes in investing in young talent." Luca's eyes filled with tears as she listened to her son play pieces that were far beyond his previous ability level. His technique refined by instruction that would have cost thousands of dollars per month. She was becoming increasingly certain it was the same someone behind the soccer scholarship and tutoring program was systematically investing in her son's future. "Who do you think it is?" she asked her sister during one of their weekly phone calls. "Someone with serious resources and specific interest in Ollie's development. Someone who knows exactly what he needs and when he needs it. Does it matter?" Her sister replied, "If someone wants to help him succeed and they're not asking for anything in return, maybe you should just be grateful." But Luca's business instincts told her that generosity this targeted was never truly anonymous. Someone was watching her son, studying his needs, investing in his future with the precision of a parent rather than the randomness of a philanthropist. The thought should have worried her, but instead it filled her with a complicated emotion she couldn't quite name. Meanwhile, Harry's own life was crumbling in ways that made his secret generosity feel both more meaningful and more desperate. His business partnerships continued to dissolve as former friends chose Martinez Solutions over Walsh Construction. His social circle shrank as people gravitated toward success and away from failure. His mother's visits became increasingly uncomfortable as she realized her manipulations had destroyed not just Harry's marriage, but his entire future. "You could fight her," Diane suggested during one of their strained dinners. "Expose how she's stealing your clients, using what she learned from you against you. Make people see that she's just a vindictive ex-wife trying to destroy you." "She's not vindictive," Harry replied quietly. "She's just better at this than I ever was." And she learned it by watching me fail at things she now does perfectly. So you're just going to let her win? She already won. 5 years ago, when I chose your lies over her love. Everything that's happened since then has just been the consequences of that choice, catching up with me. Harry's acceptance of his defeat seemed to disturb his mother more than his anger ever had. She had expected him to fight, to rage, to refuse to accept that the woman she had tried to destroy was now demonstrating her superiority in every measurable way. Instead, Harry seemed almost peaceful about his downfall, as if losing everything had clarified something important about what actually mattered. The investigators' reports became Harry's lifeline to purpose. Through them, he learned that Ollie was considering applying to MIT for early admission, his improved mathematics scores and musical talents making him a compelling candidate. Harry began researching the application process, the requirements, the ways that exceptional students could stand out in a competitive field. An anonymous donation to MIT's music program created a new scholarship specifically for students who showed exceptional promise in both engineering and musical performance. The scholarship would cover full tuition, room, board, and provide a stipend for living expenses. The selection criteria seemed almost custom-designed for a student exactly like Oliver Walsh. "It's like the scholarship was created for you," Luca told her son as they read through the requirements together. Engineering aptitude, musical talent, demonstrated leadership potential, financial need despite academic excellence. "You check every single box. Do you think the same person who's been helping me is behind this too?" Ollie asked. Luca looked at her son, seeing not just his physical resemblance to Harry, but his intellectual curiosity, his strategic thinking, his ability to see patterns that others missed. "I think," she said carefully, "that you have a guardian angel who understands exactly what you need to succeed." "But who? Does it matter? Someone believes in you enough to invest in your future. The important thing is making sure you deserve that faith." That night, Luca stood at her office window, looking out over the city, wondering about the mysterious benefactor who seemed to understand her son's potential better than anyone except herself. The investments were too strategic to be random, too perfectly timed to be coincidental, too generous to be casual philanthropy. Someone was watching Ollie grow up, celebrating his achievements, supporting his dreams, investing in his future with the dedication of a parent. Someone who remained invisible but present, absent but caring, estranged but devoted. Someone who might be trying to earn through generosity what he had forfeited through betrayal. The right to call himself a father, even if no one would ever know he was trying to deserve the title. In his empty mansion, Harry read the investigator's latest report about Ollie's MIT scholarship application and felt something he hadn't experienced in 5 years. Hope, not for forgiveness or reconciliation, but for the possibility that his son might have opportunities that his father's failures could never limit. He was learning to love someone from the shadows, to be a father without acknowledgement, to give without receiving credit. It wasn't the parenthood he had imagined, but it was the only kind he had earned. And slowly, secretly, it was beginning to feel like enough. Chapter 8. Cracks in the armor. Even the strongest hearts can soften, slightly. Ollie Walsh had inherited his mother's analytical mind, and at 15, he had learned to observe patterns the way other teenagers observed social media trends. The scholarship to soccer camp, the sudden availability of the best calculus tutor in the city, the piano lessons with Mrs. Chen, the MIT scholarship that seemed custom-designed for his exact talents and circumstances. None of it felt like coincidence to someone raised by a woman who had built an empire on the principle that nothing worthwhile happened by accident. He began keeping a notebook, documenting each mysterious opportunity the way his mother tracked business metrics. The timing, the requirements, the selection processes, all of it pointed towards someone with significant resources and intimate knowledge of his needs, his strengths, his potential. Someone who understood not just what he wanted, but what he needed to succeed. Someone who cared enough to watch from the shadows, but remained too proud or too guilty to step into the light. The realization came to him during a particularly challenging piano lesson with Mrs. Chen. She was pushing him through a complex piece by Rachmaninoff, her teaching style demanding excellence while somehow making every mistake feel like progress toward perfection. During a break, she mentioned something that made Ollie's analytical mind focus with laser precision. "Your anonymous sponsor has interesting timing," she said casually while organizing sheet music. "The initial inquiry about your talent came just 3 days after your mother's interview in Construction Weekly, where she mentioned your musical abilities. Most benefactors aren't quite so responsive to current events." Ollie went home that evening and did what his mother had trained him to do when facing a complex problem. He gathered data, analyzed patterns, and followed the evidence to its logical conclusion. Construction Weekly had featured a cover story about Martinez Solutions' rapid growth, including a sidebar about Luca balancing motherhood and entrepreneurship. The article had mentioned Ollie's academic challenges, his musical talent, his soccer potential, and his mother's concerns about affording the support he needed to develop his gifts. 3 days later, the piano scholarship inquiry had been made. 5 days after that, the soccer camp scholarship. Within 2 weeks, the tutoring program. Someone was reading articles about his family and responding to his mother's expressed concerns with targeted assistance. Someone who knew exactly what kind of help would matter most. That someone could only be his father. The knowledge sat in Ollie's chest like a stone, heavy with implications he wasn't sure he was ready to examine. For 15 years, he had lived with the certainty that Harry Walsh was irrelevant to his life, a man who had chosen pride over family and lived with the consequences. The idea that his father had been watching from the shadows, supporting his development, investing in his future without demanding credit or recognition, it complicated everything Ollie thought he knew about abandonment, responsibility, and love. He didn't tell his mother about his suspicions immediately. Instead, he began watching for other signs, other evidence of invisible support. The small scholarship that covered his school's technology fee, the anonymous donation that funded new equipment for the soccer team, the mysterious benefactor who had endowed a music practice room at his school, available to students who showed exceptional promise. All of it traced back to someone with intimate knowledge of his daily life and unlimited resources to address his needs. His father was trying to be a parent in the only way he had left, through generosity that demanded nothing in return, support that came with no strings attached, love expressed through actions rather than presence. It was insufficient and overwhelming at the same time, inadequate compensation for 15 years of absence, but undeniable evidence of someone who cared enough to sacrifice credit for impact. Ollie found himself studying his reflection more carefully, looking for traces of the man who shared his DNA but had forfeited the right to share his life. The dark hair, the height that was already surpassing his mother's, the way his hands moved when he played piano. There were similarities that couldn't be denied, connections that went deeper than conscious choice. The confrontation with his suspicions came during a family dinner at his aunt's house. Luca was describing the latest mysterious scholarship that had appeared. This one funding a summer engineering program that would give Ollie advanced placement credits toward his eventual MIT application. "Someone really believes in you," his aunt commented. "This level of support doesn't happen by accident." "No," Ollie said quietly, "it doesn't." Something in his tone made Luca look at him sharply. After 15 years of single motherhood, she had developed radar for her son's emotional states that bordered on psychic. "What's on your mind, baby?" "I think I know who our mysterious benefactor is," The room went quiet. Luca set down her fork, giving Ollie her complete attention. "Who?" "My father." The words hung in the air like smoke, visible and toxic and impossible to ignore. Luca's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, consideration, recognition, and something that might have been resignation. "What makes you think that?" "The timing, the precision, the fact that every scholarship and opportunity addresses something you mentioned in interviews or articles. Someone's been reading about us, Mom. Someone with resources and detailed knowledge of what I need. Someone who cares, but can't admit to caring." Luca was quiet for a long moment, processing information with the analytical rigor that had made her successful in business. When she spoke, her voice was carefully neutral. "Would it matter if it was him?" "I don't know," Ollie admitted. "It doesn't change anything about what he did to us. It doesn't excuse 15 years of absence. But it also doesn't feel like the behavior of someone who doesn't care. Caring and being present are different things, Ollie. I know. But so are abandonment and investment. If he's been supporting me this whole time, without asking for credit or recognition, what does that mean?" Luca studied her son's face, seeing Harry's analytical nature combined with her own moral complexity. Ollie was too intelligent to dismiss evidence that didn't fit his preferred narrative, too honest to ignore uncomfortable truths, too compassionate to reject gestures of love simply because they came from an imperfect source. "It means," she said carefully, "that people are more complicated than we sometimes want them to be. It means that someone can make terrible choices and still love the people they hurt. It means that guilt and regret can motivate positive actions, even when forgiveness isn't possible." "Do you think it's him?" "I think," Luca said slowly, "that you've inherited my investigative instincts and your father's strategic thinking. If you believe the evidence points to him, you're probably right. What do we do about it?" "Nothing. If he wants to support your success from the shadows, let him. If he wants to invest in your future without demanding a role in your present, that's his choice. Take the opportunities, use them to build the life you want, and don't feel guilty about accepting help from someone who owes you more than he can ever repay." That night, Ollie lay in bed thinking about fathers and sons, about love and abandonment, about the difference between presence and support. His father was a stranger who had rejected him before birth, but also apparently the invisible force that had been ensuring he had every opportunity to succeed. Harry Walsh was both the man who had called him a bastard and the man who was funding his path to MIT. The contradiction was too complex for anger, too nuanced for forgiveness, too real for dismissal. Over the following weeks, Ollie found himself paying more attention to the small details of his supported life. The scholarship that covered his AP exam fees, the anonymous donation that brought a guest conductor to his school's orchestra program, the mysterious benefactor who had endowed an annual award for academic excellence in engineering and music, an award that came with a significant cash prize and guaranteed consideration for several prestigious university programs. Each gesture was perfectly calibrated to his needs, timed to his development, designed to maximize his opportunities without demanding his acknowledgement. It was fatherhood expressed through strategic philanthropy, love channeled through anonymous generosity, parenting reduced to its most essential function, ensuring his child had every chance to succeed. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough to compensate for 15 years of absence, 15 years of letting Luca carry the entire burden of raising their son, 15 years of choosing pride over family. But it was something real, something meaningful, something that suggested the capacity for love, even in someone who had forfeited the right to express it directly. When Ollie's MIT acceptance letter arrived, full scholarship, as expected, with additional funding for research opportunities and study abroad programs, he read it twice before walking to his mother's office. "It came," he said simply, placing the letter on her desk. Luca read it with the fierce pride of a woman who had raised a son capable of anything, but also with the complicated knowledge that his success had been supported by hands they never saw, funded by generosity they couldn't acknowledge, made possible by someone who loved from a distance because proximity had been forfeited through betrayal. "I'm proud of you," she said, pulling him into a hug that felt like victory and loss combined. "Mom," Ollie said quietly, "if he's really been helping all this time, if he's really been watching and supporting and investing in my future, doesn't that count for something?" Luca held her son tighter, feeling the weight of questions that had no easy answers. "It counts for something," she agreed. "But whether it counts for enough is a decision only you can make." Outside, in a car parked across from the Martinez Solutions building, Harry Walsh watched through binoculars as mother and son celebrated the MIT acceptance letter. He had received his own copy of the acceptance notification. Anonymous benefactors were kept informed of their investments' outcomes and had spent the afternoon feeling proud in ways he had no right to claim. His son was going to MIT. His son was going to have opportunities that would let his intelligence flourish. His son was going to succeed in ways that his father's failures could never limit. It wasn't fatherhood as Harry had imagined it, but it was the only kind he had earned. And watching Ollie and Luca embrace in celebration of a future Harry had helped make possible, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the quiet satisfaction of doing right by someone he loved, even if they would never know he had tried. The armor around his son's heart was developing cracks, and through those cracks, questions were beginning to grow. Questions about love and abandonment, about presence and support, about whether 15 years of invisible investment could begin to balance 15 years of visible absence. Questions that would soon demand answers Harry wasn't sure he was ready to give. Chapter 9: The Night Truth Explodes. Some secrets are too big to stay buried forever. The grand ballroom of the Meridian Hotel glittered. Like a jewelry box, crystal chandeliers casting dancing lights across 500 of the city's most powerful business leaders. The annual Construction Industry Excellence Awards represented the pinnacle of professional recognition. And tonight, Luca Martinez sat at the head table as the evening's keynote speaker and recipient of the Innovator of the Year award. She wore midnight blue silk that caught the light like captured starlight, her success draped around her shoulders like invisible armor. The past 5 years had transformed her from abandoned wife to industry royalty, and tonight's ceremony represented the official coronation of a queen who had built her own kingdom from nothing but determination and brilliance. Harry sat at a table near the back of the ballroom, far enough from the spotlight to avoid uncomfortable conversations, but close enough to witness Luca's triumph. He'd bought his ticket under his company name, though Walsh Construction had become increasingly irrelevant in industry circles. Most people treated him with the polite pity reserved for former powers, washed-up players trying to maintain dignity while their empires crumbled. Ollie was not in attendance. School night, Luca had explained to the event organizers who had asked about bringing her son to celebrate her achievement. But Harry knew from his investigators' reports that she had also wanted to keep her personal life separate from her professional celebration, protecting their son from photographers and gossip columnists who might twist their family's story into entertainment. The evening's program moved through the usual awards with ceremonial efficiency. Contractor of the Year, Safety Innovation Award, Community Impact Recognition. Each category celebrated excellence while building anticipation for the main event. When the presenter announced Luca's name as the Innovator of the Year recipient, the applause was thunderous, sustained, genuine recognition of someone who had revolutionized their industry. Luca approached the podium with the grace of someone who belonged on stages, who commanded attention through competence rather than demanding it through drama. Her acceptance speech was masterful, gracious without being self-deprecating, confident without being arrogant, inspiring without being preachy. 5 years ago, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom's perfect acoustics, I started Martinez Solutions with nothing but a laptop, a phone, and the absolute certainty that there had to be better ways to solve old problems. Tonight, I stand before you grateful not just for this recognition, but for the opportunity to prove that innovation comes not from privilege or connections, but from the willingness to see possibilities where others see obstacles. Harry watched her speak and felt pride war with regret in his chest. This magnificent woman had been his wife, his partner, his best friend. She had been ready to build empires with him, to face challenges together, to create something extraordinary from their shared dreams. He had thrown all of that away for his mother's whispered poison, trading partnership with a queen for the approval of someone who had never built anything more meaningful than family dysfunction. The applause, as Luca concluded her speech, was respectful, warm, deserved. She returned to her seat, carrying crystal and recognition, and the satisfaction of acknowledgement earned through excellence. The evening should have concluded with networking, congratulations, and celebration of achievements that spoke to the industry's bright future. Instead, it exploded into scandal when Diane Walsh appeared. Harry's mother had been drinking, not obviously, but enough to strip away the careful social controls that normally kept her poison private. She moved through the ballroom like a predator scenting weakness. Her targets the reporters and photographers who attended these events to capture moments of triumph and occasionally drama. "You want a real story?" she asked Janet Morrison from Construction Weekly, her voice carrying the conspiratorial tone of someone sharing valuable secrets. "But that woman everyone's applauding? She destroyed my son's life with lies and manipulation. Everything she's built is stolen from him. His ideas, his connections, his industry knowledge. She's a parasite who got rich off my family's destruction." Morrison was a seasoned reporter who recognized the difference between news and gossip. But she also understood that Diane Walsh's accusations carried potential significance given the family connections. "Mrs. Walsh, are you making official statements about Ms. Martinez's business practices?" "I'm telling you the truth about what really happened. She cheated on my son, got pregnant with another man's child, and when Harry rightfully threw her out, she used everything she'd learned from him to compete against him. She's been systematically destroying his business out of revenge." Other conversations were beginning to stop as Diane's voice rose, her accusations spreading like ripples through the ballroom's social dynamics. Harry watched from across the room with growing horror, recognizing the moment when his mother's need for vindication collided catastrophically with public scrutiny. Morrison pulled out her phone, activating its recording function with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to capture news as it developed. "Mrs. Walsh, you're alleging that Ms. Martinez committed fraud. I'm alleging that she's a manipulative whore who destroyed my family and built her success on stolen ideas and revenge. Everyone in this room is celebrating a lie." The words carried across the ballroom with devastating clarity. Conversations stopped entirely as 500 business leaders turned to stare at the source of accusations that were transforming their elegant evening into a public scandal. Luca, still seated at the head table, went very still as she processed what was happening. Morrison, recognizing a story that would dominate industry news cycles, pressed forward. "You're saying Ms. Martinez was unfaithful to your son?" "I saw her with the other man. I tried to warn Harry, but he was too trusting, too loving to see what she really was. When he finally confronted her about the pregnancy, she played the victim and ran off with her bastard child rather than face the truth." The ballroom had become completely quiet. 500 people witnessing character assassination, delivered with the enthusiasm of someone who had waited years for this audience. Photographers began moving closer, sensing that the evening's real story was happening away from the podium. Harry stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with sound that seemed amplified in the sudden silence. He began moving toward his mother, but he was too far away, and the damage was accelerating faster than he could contain it. "Mrs. Walsh," Morrison continued, "you're making very serious allegations. Do you have proof of these claims? I have 15 years of watching that woman destroy my son's life piece by piece. I have the evidence of my own eyes when I saw her with her lover. I have the proof of what she's done to Harry's business since she started her revenge campaign." Luca stood up slowly, her movement drawing every eye in the ballroom. She walked to the small stage where the podium still held her award, her steps measured and deliberate. When she reached the microphone, she adjusted it with the same precision she brought to everything else and looked out over the crowd with complete composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," her voice was clear, strong, completely in control. "It appears that Mrs. Diane Walsh has some concerns about my character and business practices that she feels need to be addressed publicly. Since she's chosen to make private family matters part of tonight's professional celebration, I think it's only fair that you hear the complete story." The ballroom's atmosphere crackled with tension as 500 of the industry's most influential people prepared to witness either a public relations disaster or a masterclass in crisis management. Photographers positioned themselves for optimal angles, while reporters activated recording devices, recognizing that they were about to witness something that would reshape industry dynamics. 15 years ago, Luca continued, I was married to Mrs. Walsh's son, Harry. After 15 years of trying to conceive, I became pregnant. Instead of celebrating this miracle, my husband chose to believe his mother's fabricated accusations of infidelity rather than trust the woman he had sworn to honor and cherish. He threw me out while I was pregnant, publicly rejected his child, and made his choice between his mother's lies and his family's truth. Diane Walsh's face was flushing red as she realized her moment of vindication was becoming her moment of exposure. She tried to interrupt, but Luca's voice cut through her protests with surgical precision. I left that marriage with nothing but my dignity and my unborn child. I built Martinez Solutions from the ground up, using no resources, no connections, and no knowledge that wasn't freely available to anyone willing to work hard enough to learn it. Every client I've earned, every innovation I've developed, every success I've achieved has been accomplished through competence, not revenge. The audience was completely silent, absorbed in a drama that was revealing hidden dynamics within their professional community. Harry had finally reached his mother, but he stood frozen as Luca continued her devastating response. Mrs. Walsh's accusations tonight reveal more about her character than they do about mine. A woman who would destroy her son's marriage with lies, break up his family with manipulation, and then blame the victim for the consequences is demonstrating exactly the kind of moral bankruptcy that has no place in our professional community. Luca's voice remained steady, professional, devastating in its controlled delivery of facts that recontextualized everything Diane had said. I have never stolen anything from anyone. I have never used my marriage or my divorce for business advantage. I've simply worked harder, learned faster, and innovated better than my competitors. If that has resulted in some companies, including my ex-husband's, losing market share, that's not revenge, that's capitalism. The applause began slowly, a few people recognizing the dignity and strength of Luca's response. It built gradually as the audience processed what they had witnessed, not a scandal involving a vindictive ex-wife, but a master class in grace under fire, delivered by a woman who had been publicly attacked and had responded with devastating professionalism. Diane Walsh stood in the middle of the ballroom, suddenly understanding that her moment of vindication had become her public humiliation. Every word out of Luca's mouth had recast her as the villain in a story where she had expected to be the hero. The truth-teller exposing lies rather than the liar being exposed by truth. Harry looked at his mother, then at Luca, standing tall at the podium, and finally understood the choice he had made 15 years ago. Not between two versions of truth, but between two kinds of people, one who built up and one who tore down. One who created and one who destroyed, one who loved and one who poisoned love with fear and jealousy and lies. As the applause for Luca continued, Harry Walsh finally saw his mother for exactly what she was, and himself for exactly what he had chosen to become when he listened to her instead of trusting the woman who had been worthy of his faith all along. The truth had exploded into the open. But it wasn't the truth Diane had wanted to reveal. It was the truth about 15 years of lies, manipulation, and the destruction of a family by someone who had preferred control to love, vindication to peace, and poison to the possibility that her son might be happier with someone else than he had ever been with her. And in the aftermath of that explosion, as photographers captured Luca's triumph and Diane's humiliation, Harry Walsh finally understood that some truths are too big to stay buried, and some secrets destroy the people who keep them more than the people they're meant to protect. Chapter 10. Graduation Day Judgment. At Ollie's graduation, 16 years of pain would finally reach its conclusion. The June morning was perfect, the kind of day that felt designed for celebrations and new beginnings. Lincoln High School's football stadium buzzed with the controlled chaos of graduation preparation. Proud families claiming seats, faculty members adjusting sound systems, and 300 seniors in caps and gowns practicing the processional that would mark their transition from children to adults. Ollie Walsh stood at the back of the staging area, adjusting his honor cords and trying to calm nerves that had nothing to do with public speaking. As valedictorian, he would address his classmates and their families. But the speech folded in his pocket felt less important than the conversation he had requested with his parents afterward. Both parents, together, for the first time in 16 years. Luca arrived early, as she did for everything involving her son. She wore a soft grey dress that spoke of understated elegance, her success visible in the quality of her clothes and the confidence in her bearing. Other parents recognized her. The Martinez Solutions CEO had become something of a local celebrity after the industry awards scandal 3 months earlier, when Diane Walsh's public accusations had backfired spectacularly. The confrontation at the awards ceremony had been a watershed moment, crystallizing public opinion around Luca as a woman of integrity who had been wronged by people too small to appreciate her strength. Business magazines had featured her story as an example of resilience and grace under fire. Speaking invitations poured in from women's organizations, leadership conferences and business schools. But today, she was just a mother watching her son graduate at the top of his class, headed to MIT on a full scholarship that would let him build whatever future his intelligence could imagine. Harry arrived exactly on time, neither early enough to seem eager nor late enough to appear disrespectful. He had lost weight over the past months, his suit hanging differently on a frame that seemed diminished by more than just physical changes. The industry awards scandal had accelerated his business's decline as clients and partners distanced themselves from someone whose family dysfunction had played out in public with such devastating clarity. But more than business failure, Harry was diminished by knowledge of what he had lost, what he had chosen, what he had allowed his mother's poison to cost him. Diane Walsh was now persona non grata in social circles that had once tolerated her manipulation, and Harry was beginning to understand how completely her lies had shaped his choices and destroyed his judgment. He took a seat 3 rows behind Luca, close enough to share the experience of watching their son graduate, but far enough away to respect the boundaries that 16 years of absence had created. Other families pointed and whispered, recognizing the principles in a drama that had been dissected in newspaper articles and industry publications for months. The processional began with pomp and circumstance, played by the school's orchestra, and 300 graduates filed into the stadium with the measured dignity that high school graduation ceremonies demanded. Ollie was among the last to enter, walking with the other honor students, his academic achievements visible in the multiple cords draped across his gown. Harry felt his chest tighten as he watched his son, tall, confident, obviously intelligent, moving through the world with the easy assurance of someone who had been raised to believe in his own worth. This young man was graduating with honors, headed to one of the world's most prestigious universities, carrying himself like someone who had never doubted his place in any room he entered. All of it accomplished without Harry's presence, guidance, or support, except for the anonymous scholarships and opportunities that had smoothed Ollie's path while keeping Harry himself invisible. Principal Martinez, no relation to Luca, despite the shared surname, delivered opening remarks about achievement, potential, and the bright futures awaiting the graduating class. Faculty awards were announced, scholarships were recognized, and the usual graduation rituals proceeded with ceremonial efficiency. Then Ollie took the podium to deliver his valedictorian address. Fellow graduates, families, faculty, and friends, his voice carried clearly through the stadium's sound system, confident and warm. Today, we celebrate not just what we've accomplished, but what we've learned about accomplishment itself. We've learned that success isn't about the advantages you start with, it's about the work you're willing to do with whatever opportunities you find or create. Harry listened to his son speak and heard echoes of both parents' Luca's analytical precision combined with Harry's natural charisma, refined by 16 years of being raised by a mother who had built an empire through intelligence and determination. We've learned, Ollie continued, that families come in many shapes, that love takes many forms, and that the people who matter most are the ones who show up consistently, not the ones who show up occasionally with good intentions and explanations. The words weren't directed specifically at Harry, but he felt them like personal accusations, gentle but unmistakable observations about presence and absence, consistency and reliability, love expressed through actions rather than words. We've learned that forgiveness is possible, but it's not the same thing as trust. We've learned that trust must be earned through time and consistency, not demanded through relationship or apology. We've learned that some mistakes are too fundamental to be erased, but that doesn't mean growth and change are impossible. Ollie's speech continued for 12 minutes, touching on themes of responsibility, opportunity, and the obligation that comes with privilege and education. But Harry heard mostly the subtext, messages about second chances and earned redemption, about the difference between deserving forgiveness and receiving it, about love that might exist but need not be reciprocated. When the ceremony concluded with the traditional cap-throwing celebration, families began gravitating toward their graduates for photos and congratulations. Harry hung back, uncertain of his welcome, watching as Luca embraced their son with fierce pride and obvious love. Ollie scanned the crowd until he found Harry, then nodded toward the quieter area behind the stadium where they had agreed to meet. It was time for the conversation that would determine whether 16 years of absence could be balanced by whatever Harry had to offer going forward. They met near the school's memorial garden, a quiet space designed for reflection and serious conversations. Luca stood beside their son, not protectively but supportively, ready to let Ollie drive the discussion while ensuring he wasn't alone in facing whatever Harry might say or ask. "Congratulations," Harry said, his voice rough with emotion he couldn't quite control. "Your speech was incredible. You're going to do amazing things at MIT. "Thank you," Ollie replied politely. "I wanted to talk to both of you together because what I have to say involves all three of us." Harry nodded, bracing himself for whatever judgment his son was about to deliver. "I know about the scholarships," Ollie said simply. "The soccer camp, the tutoring, the piano lessons, the MIT funding. I know you've been supporting my education and opportunities from the shadows for years." The words hit Harry like physical blows. His carefully maintained anonymity had been pierced by a teenager with his mother's investigative instincts and his father's strategic thinking. "I figured it out about 8 months ago," Ollie continued. "The timing was too perfect, the targeting too precise. Someone with resources and detailed knowledge of my needs had been watching and helping. Someone who cared but couldn't admit to caring." Luca looked at Harry with something that wasn't quite surprise. She had suspected the same thing, but had chosen not to investigate too thoroughly, preferring to accept help for her son rather than complicate their lives with unwanted confrontations. "I want to thank you for that," Ollie said. "Whatever your motivations, whatever your reasons, you invested in my future when you had no legal obligation to do so and no guarantee of recognition or gratitude. That matters." Harry felt tears threatening, his son's grace more devastating than anger could have been. "But," Ollie continued, and the word hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall, "investment isn't the same thing as relationship. Financial support isn't the same thing as emotional presence. Anonymous generosity doesn't erase 16 years of choosing not to be my father when it mattered most." "I know," Harry whispered. "I know I have no right to ask for anything. You're right. You don't. But I'm going to tell you what I've decided anyway." Ollie straightened to his full height, looking remarkably like Harry, but speaking with Luca's moral clarity and emotional intelligence. "I'm willing to let you try to be my father. Not because you deserve it, not because I need it, not because Mom thinks it's a good idea. I'm willing because I'm curious about who you might become if given the chance to try again, and because I think people should have opportunities to grow beyond their worst mistakes." The words were delivered without warmth, but also without cruelty, a business proposition rather than an emotional reconciliation. "But," Ollie continued, "I have conditions. You cut all contact with your mother. Her poison destroyed our family once, and I won't risk letting it happen again. You accept that Mom doesn't owe you anything. Not forgiveness, not friendship, not a relationship beyond what's necessary for co-parenting an adult child. And you understand that this is probation, not reconciliation. You're earning the right to be called my father, not returning to a position you once held." Harry nodded, understanding that his son was offering him a gift that came with strings attached, the chance to prove himself worthy of a relationship that would have to be built from nothing, with no credit for biology or history or good intentions. "And Mom," Ollie turned to Luca, "I need you to let him try. Not for his sake, but for mine. I want to see who he is now, what he's learned, whether he's capable of being the kind of man who deserves to be in our lives. I can't make that assessment if you protect me from finding out." Luca studied her son's face, seeing the determination that had carried him through 16 years of questions about fathers, through academic challenges, through the complexity of being raised by a single mother who had never spoken ill of his absent father, but had never made excuses for him either. "What do you want from me?" she asked Harry directly. "Nothing," Harry replied immediately. "I want nothing from you except the chance to prove to Ollie that I can be better than I was. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect friendship. I don't expect anything beyond the courtesy you might show any other parent of his friends." "And from me?" Ollie asked. "Time," Harry said. "Just time to show you who I am now, what I've learned, how I've changed. Time to prove that anonymous generosity was just the beginning of trying to deserve the title of father." Ollie looked at his mother, seeing the woman who had raised him with love and strength and the fierce protection of someone who had learned to trust her own judgment above all else. Then he looked at his father, seeing someone who had lost everything through his own choices and was asking for the chance to build something new from the ruins. "Okay," Ollie said finally, "but we start small. Coffee once a month. Phone calls when I want them, not when you need them. And the first time you disappoint me, the first time you choose something else over showing up, the first time you make me feel like I'm competing with your pride or your mother or your business for your attention, we're done. Forever." "I understand," Harry said. "Do you?" Ollie's question carried the weight of 16 years of disappointment that he had never been allowed to feel. "Because I'm not a little boy who needs a daddy. I'm a young man who might be interested in having a father if that father proves he's worth having. The difference matters." Harry looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw someone who had inherited the best qualities from both parents while developing strengths that belonged entirely to him. Intelligence from both sides, Luca's moral clarity, Harry's analytical nature, and something uniquely his own that spoke of confidence earned rather than inherited. "I understand," Harry said, and for the first time in 16 years, he actually did. As they walked back toward the graduation celebration, Harry understood that he wasn't getting his old life back. He was being given the opportunity to build a new one, based not on what he had once been, but on what he might become. It would require years of consistency, daily choices to prioritize relationship over pride, and the acceptance that love must be earned rather than expected. But for the first time since the night he had thrown away his family, Harry Walsh felt hope that redemption might be possible, not as a return to what had been lost, but as the creation of something new and better and worth the years of work it would require to build. The reckoning had finally arrived, and his son was both judge and jury, offering not forgiveness but opportunity, not reconciliation, but the chance to prove that people can change when the cost of staying the same becomes unbearable. Whether Harry would prove worthy of that chance remained to be seen. But today, walking beside the son who had succeeded in spite of his absence and the woman who had built an empire from his betrayal, he finally understood what he was working toward. Not forgiveness for his past, but the right to be part of their future.